Okay.
Then the next thing on underneath my name is for sympathy cards for Melanie, and I think that Julie had that one. So I'm hoping Julie got that one sent out, or.
Well, I got one I had one at the extraction party. That's what I did.
Okay.
And I also
did you send it out already?
Okay, so we sent one to them, and have we sent one to the Ayers family?
Have the one for the Ayers family. I just need to drop it in the mail.
Okay.
And I will do that. And I think that's all for me.
Okay, so we've gave a sympathy card to Melanie and the Ayers family. If you didn't know, Robbie's mother passed away, so Robbie lost his mother, and Will lost his grandma. So we're sending them sympathy cards. Okay, Julie, you're up.
All righty. Okay, I'm Julie. I'm the treasurer. Let's see. Our cash balance is $3,598.02. 3598.02. I did transfer everything over from the PayPal account today, and we did have $307.01 there, but now that is included in this balance. That does, I took out I wrote you a check, Jan. I'll get it in the mail tomorrow, but that large expenditure for the pollen feeders is out of this balance, just so, because I thought you might be wondering.
Okay.
And then I have I have one member that paid on PayPal and also gave me a check, which I deposited before I realized it was a duplicate payment. So I have a $25 check ready to mail tomorrow to reimburse him for that double payment.
Okay.
So that's everything.
Was that Bill?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, because
so
he said he mailed it, but it, I guess it was delayed or something. So he went and did PayPal.
That's exactly what happened. And I just got that check, I guess probably yesterday from the extension office. I don't know. I guess it was just a timing thing. I don't really know. I picked up a bunch of them yesterday, and I went ahead and, I guess yesterday or the day before, and I went ahead and got, went to the bank right away and got those deposited. So, and I'd like to remind you guys that to use the mentoring, the club mentoring, which is one of our really nice benefits. You do have your membership renewed. And after I did our deposits, because there was quite a few things at the extension office, we are now up to 43 members.
All right.
So we're getting kind of back to the 70, not quite. I will send out an email tomorrow, and that reminder email, and just have just a big email to ask everyone to send their dues in. So maybe in the next week or so we'll have a response from that. And I'll have to send a form, I guess, as well, a membership form.
Okay. It sounds good.
So hopefully we'll get back up to where we were. So thank you.
I was looking at last year's August reports, and last year we had about 43 members at this time.
There you go. Well, that's true. You will trickle in, over the next, 9 months. So that's a good point. There will be new people come, and I think it will help once we're having our meetings so everybody can see each other. I think that will help. We'll start getting some new people in. So
all right,
I like that.
All right, well, let's go ahead and move on. Well, there we go. Communications, Susan, you're up.
Hi, everybody. I'm not getting a lot of response from teachers, and I don't know if they just get inundated with email and it's going to spam. They don't know who I am. So if anybody has an into a junior high or high school, a teacher that I could get in contact with, give them some information, have them get my information, please contact me. You should be able to do it through the website. I'll get with our wonderful webmaster and make sure I'm listed. But just seeing if we've got any help. The responses we've got back have been really good, and Byron's been able to go out and do things. So I think if we can really start getting the word out there, we'll start getting a lot more interest, and we'd really like that. So really appreciate it. Thanks.
Okay. Right. Byron, you're up now. Byron?
Talking to myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks to Susan's efforts, we've got the Collinsville High School and the Munster High School have responded back. I haven't been able to connect with the Collinsville ag teacher to solidify anything yet, but they want to do it. Last Friday, I went to the Munster High School. They have two ag teachers. One teaches animal stuff, the other teaches agricultural mechanical stuff. Well, they combine their classes throughout the day, and there were 4 sections or 4 periods. And I took an observation hive. I took a mock hive with frames in it, and then I had a couple of charts that I took with me, and talked to them about the importance of bees and beekeeping, the fruits and vegetables and foods that we would lose if bees and pollinators went away. Handed out information about the club, about the Texas Honeybee Health Education, or Texas Honeybee Education Association, and Texas Beekeepers Association. I have to tell you, high school crowds are tough. It was a Friday, so it was a game day, so I could see they probably had other things on their mind. They weren't really inquisitive. They listened intently and that kind of stuff. I didn't get a whole lot of questions, but I did leave the information. I talked to them about the scholarship program that we offer and stuff. But based upon that, I'm going to kind of tailor my approach and my talk a little bit. I'm used to speaking to adult groups who are interested and ask questions and want to be beekeepers. These kids, they were interested in getting to the next class. So
Yeah.
still we made an impact and made a contact, and I'm still in touch with those teachers if they want me to come back and do a second, more advanced discussion on bees. The periods only lasted I only had about 30 minutes. By the time the kids got in, they did the roll, and you have about 30 minutes to talk and about 5 minutes for questions, and let them come up and look at the observation hive, and then the bell rings and they got to go. So you don't get a whole lot of time with them. So I'm going to have to tailor my approach to really make sure I can get through to them real quickly. But it was interesting.
Well, the main point is to get the word out that we
Yes.
exist and that they have that opportunity.
Yep.
All right. Well, that's great.
Really appreciate it, Byron.
Thank you, Susan.
I have a program coming up with Ollie in Denton. It's a program for retired people. So they usually ask more questions. It's a Zoom meeting. So we'll see what happens with that. But it's mainly a case of getting the information out. Let people know we even exist. Okay, Stacy, are you on?
Howdy. Nothing really new. Have some updates to make to the website, but I don't really have anything new to add. Keep sending those honey recipes in, and let me know if there's anything we would like to see. If you have any, do you have any questions for me tonight?
Oh, I know I just sent you that honey recipe today, so.
Yeah. No, I'll get it. I'll do all my updates this weekend.
Yeah, at the extraction party, I had quite a few people asking me about the watermelon drink. So I guess I need to put that together, but it doesn't use honey, but people were interested in it. So may put that one up there underneath the extraction party recipes or something.
Gotcha.
You guys, you've been doing a great job on the website. I really
Well, thank
appreciate it.
No problem.
All right,
Yeah,
Tim,
Stacy, the
you're up.
website is, I was just wondering, Stacy, let Stacy know the website's really looking good and it's a lot easier to use. I've been really happy with it.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that. And thanks for letting me know.
Yeah, it looks great.
Yeah.
Looks
Right.
great.
Tim?
Good evening to everybody that's here. Looks like we actually have a few people here tonight. Just a reminder that we do have a mentorship program, and if you're a member, especially a new member, if you're interested or feel that you need a mentor, get a hold of me and we'll assign someone to you to help you out in your latest bee ventures. And tell him I call him back, sorry. And the other program that we're currently kind of getting off the ground and running is the Bee Angel program. And that's for anybody that may have a temporary need for a little bit of help. Either one of those programs, if you need any more information, just get a hold of me through the website.
Okay.
That's all I got.
So is Melanie on here tonight?
I didn't see her.
Well, we'll have to let her know that we're going to be having our meeting, so we're going to be needing hospitality next month. Okay. I did want to, I don't know whether Dana is on here or not, but I wanted to thank Dana for helping out with the extraction party with hospitality there. Of course, Melanie was also there, and you know, we needed lots of hands to handle all that food. So I really appreciate everybody that helped with the hospitality at the extraction party. All right. Well, let's go on to some blooming nectar plants. Some of the ones I've been seeing lately is like the slender bush clover has been blooming. It just kind of got started. The bees like that. It's a legume, so it's also a nitrogen fixer. It's a native perennial. They kind of have like little pea type flowers, and they're probably about, usually they're about knee high. So it's a good little plant for the bees. Garlic chives. Last year I gave out a whole bunch of garlic chive seeds to people, and they haven't, of course, they're blooming right now, but if they usually produce lots of seeds. So if I get a lot of seeds, I'll be able to bring some more in, and people could take some. They grow like weeds. They'll take over if you aren't careful, but the bees do love them. Of course, when you mow, it smells like garlic. When you walk on them, it smells like garlic. But I've got spots where they are that are never watered, and they survive. They survive really well. They can be invasive. That's one of the reasons why I cut the tops off, but when they start seeding out, because otherwise my entire yard would be garlic chives. But it's a perennial, and you can use it for culinary uses. It's got a real mild onion flavor to it. So whenever I want a little onion flavor, maybe to some salads, or just sprinkle on some, egg drop soup or something, I go out and snip a little bit of it and add it. very tough plant. Actually, sunflowers start blooming. Bees like that. It's a member of the Asteraceae family. It's also a native perennial that blooms every fall around this time. It's doing right now. It's kind of a pretty sunflower. You do kind of need to keep an eye on where it goes too, because it spreads quite readily, and it can get pretty tall. At least it can get up to about 4 foot. So if you put it in a garden, you want it to be back behind, you know, allow it to grow tall. Autumn joy sedum, that is of course, it's a sedum, so it's a low water type plant. It likes well-drained soil. Because of all the clay at my place, I have it in pots. It darkens over time. I've found that the honeybees like it when it first starts opening up, but as it gets more mature, the bumblebees move in and they will nectar on it. When it starts blooming, it pulls in the honeybees and then it pulls in the bumblebees. But it's a pretty easy plant to grow as long as it's got well-drained soil, and it propagates kind of strangely. Instead of producing seed, it actually produces pups on the old stems. So in the wintertime, you'll go out and you'll look at, because it's a deciduous, so it's back, but you'll go out and you'll look at the stems, they'll have little bitty plants with little tiny roots on the sides of the stems. Whenever I get pups, I usually pot them up, and I gave away a whole bunch of plants at the last beekeeping class. So I'll continue to look at big Sexmedia. Some people call this orange Sexmedia. I don't know why they call it orange, because it looks yellow to me. But the bees like it too. It's also a very drought tolerant plant. If you give it some water, you get a little bit more blooms. It's pretty low growing, so it can be used as a border. It may be a native perennial. Will send me this photo, and Gara, but there are about 17 species of Gara in Texas, and sometimes they cross with each other, but all of them are attractive to bees. They usually always have about 4 petals on the flowers. This one here in this picture, a lot of times they call it false Gara, but it is still a member of the evening primrose family. They're great honey plants. They have long tap roots, so they're hard to transport. Find yeah, unless they're in a pot, you can't just go out and dig it up and plant it. It will not do well. They have like 4 petals on the blooms, and they'll have up to 8 stamens. So it's one of the ways to read other ones here today. So you see here, petals, and look at all these stamens, and there's a little cross-shaped right there. Oh, and sometimes they look white. This one here kind of looks pink. It said, you know, they usually get about 4 foot tall, but I guess because we've had the rain today, this plant here I took the picture of, it was about 6 foot tall. So if you plant some, remember to probably put it towards the back. Some of them are annuals and some of them are perennials. So but all of them, bees like all of them. Okay. Goldenrod. There's lots of different species of goldenrod too. There's like a flat top goldenrod, tall goldenrod, low growing goldenrod. But all the goldenrods are also very popular with the bees. And goldenrod does not cause allergy problems because it has a sticky pollen. So the old commercials they used to have that showed goldenrod and people sneezing, it wasn't the goldenrod that was causing the problem. It was probably the ragweed, which is wind pollinated. So sometimes you can find goldenrod and also get that planted. It also spreads quite readily if it's happy. So you might not want it in your formal garden bed, but it also doesn't require a lot of water. I haven't watered mine in like 2 years. So it's been surviving off of the rainwater, and I've got it growing wild all over my property. So just remember not to mow it down because it's not going to bloom until fall. So if you want goldenrod, you got to let it grow. Okay.
Hey, Jen.
Most wildflower seeds are
Jen?
planted in the fall. You can gather ripe seeds after the blooms die back and the seeds are ready to fall out. Just store them in some paper sacks until you're ready to plant them. Plant in like November, December is a great time to plant. Some seeds do better if you freeze them before planting, because they need a little of scarification, especially things like bluebonnet seeds have to be scarified in some way when you plant them, or a lot of times they will not sprout for a couple of years until nature does the scarification. Research plants before buying and planting. You know, I don't know how many times I've seen somebody plant that cute little Burford holly, you know, that was, you know, a foot tall right in front of their windows. And pretty soon that plant has grown up and covered their whole window. So, you know, research before you buy and find out what its growth habit is. Find out whether or not it's invasive, if it's happy. Find out if it's toxic to animals. You know, if you have livestock, you know, you might want to avoid planting a plant that's toxic. Or if you have a dog or a cat that likes to chew on plants, you know, find out whether or not it might be toxic. Or even if you have kids that might want to pick something and chew on it before you plant it, so that you can plant it in an appropriate location. Whoops, I didn't mean to go forward. When I was teaching programs to kids about plants, I'd use the acronym PLANTS. So the P stands for place. You know, keep you know, in mind your spacing, the height of the plant, proper location for the species, and for the homeowners. You know, you don't want that really tall plant in front of a window or where it's going to bug you every time you walk by. So think about the place for the different plants. How much light does it require? The right amount of sun, or is it a shade plant? I forgot to say on place, make sure it's not a riparian plant that you're planting in a dry location. So that's part of place too. Think about air. is it suited to our temperature zone? A lot of times the plants I see on sale at Home Depot and Walmart are not for this area. And because they're not for this area, they're not going to survive through the winter. Nutrients, does it require fertilizer? If it's a native plant, a lot of times it really doesn't require fertilizer, but you know, if it's from China, it may need fertilizer, and in some cases it may need special things like bone meal or maybe some sulfur. You know, think about whatever the nutrients are that that particular plant needs. What's its moisture requirements? You know, thirsty. You know, is it a high moisture plant? If it's a high moisture plant and you plant it in an area with plants that prefer dry, it's not going to survive. One or the other is not going to survive. If you water all the dry plants, you're going to kill them. And then if you don't water the thirsty plant, you're going to kill it. So plant similar plants together. A lot of times with the native plants, you can just kind of see where they're growing in nature. If they're growing down in the bottom of a bar ditch, they need more moisture. If they're growing on the top of a dry hill, then they don't need very much moisture. Just keep that in mind, because plants cost you a lot of money, and if you're putting them in the wrong places, you might as well take that money, dig a hole and stick it in it and bury it, and then go forget where you put it. Soil, what type of soil does it require? Is it is the pH, does it require acid soil, neutral, you know, pH, which is a 7, or is it alkaline? Does it prefer like blackland prairie soil? That can make a lot of difference. I see people plant azaleas all the time in blackland prairie alkaline soil. The azaleas will die right away in that, but I see people do it. Then they'll go buy another azalea. So do some research on what kind of soil type your plant prefers. It'll save you a lot of money in the long time. Don't just buy a plant because it's cute. I see people buy lilies a lot. They'll go in and they'll buy lilies when they're in full bloom. Well, that lily's not going to bloom again for a year. And by the time the next year rolls around, it probably won't survive the winter and it's dead. So you plant it and it's only pretty for a couple of days, and then you've got a scraggly looking plant that's unhappy. Try to avoid doing that. Okay. All right. The web has many seed sources and planting information. You know, utilize it. You know, look up plants and find out what they need, and also it's a good way to find seeds that you can't find in other ways. Be aware that just because it's called a wildflower mix, that doesn't mean it's native or adapted to our area. I've seen lots of wildflower mixes that have seeds in there that, you know, might do well in Northern California, but it doesn't do well here. Actually check and see the actual seed percentage. A lot of times you'll see these large bags of wildflower seeds, and if you read the fine print, it's only got maybe 5% seed, and the rest of it is just non-seed fillers to fill up the bag. It's just fluff. So you're not going to get too much out of it. So look at your actual seed percentages. A lot of people would like to think, they go, oh, I'm going to plant, you know, clover, or I want to plant a whole yard full of vetch. Well, those monocultures are good for short periods only. It's better to have multiple sources blooming at different times during the year. You know, have something that, you know, likes blooming in the spring, have some things that like blooming when it's hotter than heck out there, have some things that bloom in the fall. That way you're providing your bees with some nectar and pollen sources all year long. If you just have monocultures, it's kind of like if you eat the same thing every day over and over again. Bees need a mix just like we do. Some of the sources for seed wildflowers, native plants are Native American seed. They're out of Junction, Texas. They kind of specialize in native plants and grasses, and they have some different mixes you can buy. Like they even have one that's called the Bee Mix. I think they call it Be Happy or something. But you know, they're a good supplier of native plants. Wild Seed Farms in Fredericksburg, they have some native stuff and some introduced stuff, but they're a good source of seeds. And Painted Flower Farm in Denton, Texas, you can go get a lot of plants that they have started for you. So you can buy live plants in pots. And they're also a good resource for asking questions about different plants. So that's 3 sources. Of course, there's lots of sources of seed, but you kind of have to keep them when you're going on the internet. You have to figure out whether or not it's a suitable plant or for our area. Okay, September tips. I'm gonna have to move this over here. Okay, you should see an increase in brood buildup. The queen is laying her winter bees. That's one of the reasons why you want to take care of varroa mites in August and September, so that you have good healthy bees that are raising your bees that'll go through the winter. So you should start seeing an increase in laying, so that they'll be ready to go into the winter. Failing queens, if you got a bad queen, they need to be replaced now. Very weak hives, like if you only have about 2 frames of bees when you look in there, so you open up your beehive and, you know, if you got 8 or 10 frames, only 2 of them seem to have any high population of bees. That is a very weak hive, and you should do like a newspaper combine and, you know, pinch that queen that's not doing well and combine it with a stronger hive. Because if it's only got 2 frames, it's probably not going to make it through the winter. So it'd be better to combine those bees with another hive and strengthen, you know, a hive versus, you know, trying to limp along and save something that's doomed to fail. It's a good time to do fall splits if you got a very large hive. Say it's 2 packed boxes and maybe you put a 3rd box on. It's a good time to go ahead and split that off. They'll be able to both build up enough to be able to survive through the winter, and you should be able to come into spring with twice as many bees. Of course, always check your honey, pollen, and brood patterns on frames and feed if needed. I was helping one of the guys I mentor today, and we looked in one box. He said he didn't think it was doing very well. And when I looked in there and started looking at the frames, it had plenty of honey, it had plenty of pollen, but the brood pattern, there was only capped brood. And then I found a young, just emerged queen. And then I found a queen cell that had been chewed out. So she had just emerged. And at first, he thought maybe we should pinch that queen because she wasn't doing well. And I said, well, she hasn't had a chance because evidently the existing queen died and they replaced her with this queen. So let's give her a chance to see whether or not she's going to do okay. And if she doesn't, then we can combine her back. Then, he had another hive that was really, really strong. It had lots of honey. It had lots of brood. It was doing real well. But because it had so much brood, it didn't have hardly any pollen because they'd used it up. So it's always important to look for, all three. Look for your honey, look at the pollen, and look at your brood pattern to see if you've got eggs, larvae, and capped brood on your frames. You need to learn how to read those frames. The fall nectar flow has started and it's been doing pretty good so far. Those girls need about 30 to 50 pounds of honey stored for the winter. If they aren't getting anywhere close, you may need to go ahead and feed them, get them going. Otherwise, you're going to have to try and feed them all winter long. And if we have a cold winter, a lot of times they won't take syrup. Keep an eye on the nighttime temperatures. Start thinking about winterizing. We'll talk more about winterizing next month. But if you know that you're going to need to do some things like maybe change some inner covers, put in some, solid bottom boards versus screen boards, start thinking about what you're going to need to do and make sure that your bees have enough resources to make it through the winter. If you haven't done it already, test and treat for varroa if needed, and always, keep the small hive beetles in check. If you have your hives like on a pallet or on a low hive stand, you may need to purchase mouse guards to keep the mice from invading your hives in the wintertime. Okay. Tips and tools. Well, now that you've done your extraction or removed your supers, you need to take care of keeping the wax moths out. I had a nasty surprise here recently. Wax moths managed to get into a tub that I had that I thought was sealed well and destroyed all the wax in that tub. It was a mess. The paramoth, it does not kill moths or larvae, it just repels them. So if you have frames that may have some larvae or eggs, freeze them before storing with the crystals. Stack the boxes with frames on a solid surface. Make sure you don't have any openings or gaps. You place a paper towel or a sheet of paper on top of the frames, pour some crystals on the paper, and close the top with, with a cover of some sort or a board, something that'll keep, any cracks and crevices that the moths can get in, keep those closed. Then you're going to have to replace the crystals on a regular basis because they will evaporate. Make sure you air out the frames before using in the spring. Now, Paramoth is a product that you can buy from the beekeeping suppliers, but make sure that it's this dilorabenzene, 99.9%. I ordered some last month from Man Lake, and I still haven't gotten it yet. But I did find out that you can buy paramoth balls at, I got these at Target, but I've been told that Walmart carries them too. Just make sure you read the label that it says it's para-dichlorobenzene 99.9%. Be careful, do not buy regular mothballs that has this chemical in there, because that will kill your bees. But if you look at this one here, down in the fine print, you can use this one, it works just fine. So if you can't get it from the beekeeping supply stuff, I think I paid like maybe $6 for this. Because I still haven't got what I ordered from the beekeeping supply place. Okay, now this is something I just recently discovered. I don't know if it's been on the market for a long time, but this actually uses BT. And I ordered that from Man Lake, and I just got it a couple of days ago. It's only a little 5-ounce bottle, but you're only using 1 part to 19 parts water. So it's a 5% spray. It has complete instructions on there. You need to follow those instructions. But what it does is you spray this 5% solution on the frames. So it only takes 1 ounce of the mix, the 5% spray, to do a deep frame. So it goes a long way. So you spray it with this and then let it dry completely, and it'll actually kill wax moth larvae. You only have to treat it once. You don't have to go back in and keep adding crystals or anything. This, it's a bacteria that when the wax moth larva ingests it, it kills them. Okay, but read the label closely when you're using this. All right, board members, board meetings. Members are always welcome at our board meetings. Our next board meeting is October 1st at 6:30 p.m. You can check the website calendar for the link. And then our next regular meeting is going to be October 15th at VFW Hall. And maybe on Zoom too. We're going to have to do some tests and see whether or not Zoom will work. As soon as we find out, we'll let y'all know.
Hey, Jan. Jan.
Yes?
I just had a question with that spray you were just talking about.
Yes.
That instead of using the crystals, or is that as well as using for storage?
If you use the BT spray, you do not have to use the crystals. The crystals, they just repel moths. They won't kill them. If you use, so it's you can use it. You have to air the frames out before you can use it. The BT is a bacteria that when the moth larva ingest it, it kills them. It's like a bacterial infection for them.
Okay.
So if you spray it, you only have to spray it once and it stays active.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
It's like I said, I hadn't seen it before. I'd heard that they were doing some research on it, and then when I went into the Man Lake to look for the paramoth crystals. I saw they had it. It's called Certain, and it's kind of pricey, but it'll do a lot of frames, tons and tons.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll close this one out and then pull up my other PowerPoint. Okay. So I need to pull up my other one. So this, I'm going to talk a little bit about what you need to do to successfully overwinter your bees. This PowerPoint presentation was given to us, I think it was in 2018 by Roger Farr. And since I've already talked before about varroa mites, I'm not going to use that part of it, but I am going to talk about some of the other things you need to do in order to get ready to overwinter your bees. Okay. So, well, you definitely need to do your pest and disease control, and that's part of taking care of the varroa mites. I'm not going to go into detail on that because we've discussed that before. You need to take care of the nutrition for the bees and resources that they need to make it through the winter. You need to take a look at the health of your bees you have now, your hive configuration and ventilation. One of the reasons why you do what you do is, you got a hive life cycle. You got to have the, population and keeping the bees warm during the winter. Your winter bees, you want fat, healthy bees for the winter. Strategic feeding will help you with early brood production and get your hives nice and strong so that they're ready when you have nectar flow in the spring. Also, if you get the strategic feeding for early brood production, you can use that in order to do spring splits. Then we're going to go on, a little bit about how to control things, ensure the adequate resources, to reduce boxes and combine hives and prepare to feed. So we're going to kind of cover all of that. So make it your goal to take care of the bees that will take care of the bees that will go through winter. So you want the bees that you have right now that are your summer bees to be healthy so that they will raise healthy winter bees that are going to be trying to live for like 4 months. So each hive of summer bees needs 6 to 8 equivalent frames of honey and 2 equivalent frames of pollen. So you take and you add up, the patches of pollen on different frames. And if you have about 2 frames of pollen, you're doing pretty good for your summer bees. In the wintertime, each hive entering winter, and a lot of times it's the queen bees kind of quit laying eggs about middle to end of November, depending upon how cold it gets at night. So you need to have about an equivalent of 10 frames of honey, and that includes adding up any honey that's in the corners of brood frames. I'm not talking about full frames on either side, but all those little corners and half frames and quarter frames, just kind of add that all up. And if they've got about 10 equivalent frames, they've got enough to enter winter. And once again, they still need about 2 equivalent frames of pollen. Each hive, when it leaves winter, should still have about 4 to 6 equivalent frames of honey and 2 to 4 equivalent frames of pollen. So you want to have your bees nice and chunky, fat and healthy. So what do? If you've got weak hives, you need to combine them with strong hives. You can do that by pinching the non-performing queen and then doing a newspaper combine. Just set that, put a piece of newspaper over the strong hives boxes over the tops of the frames, set the weaker colony on top, and by the time they chew through the paper, they'll all be one big happy family. Then you can go back and reduce the boxes down, combine resources until you have at least 2 boxes, and you kind of want to strive for having your brood on the bottom and the honey on the top towards the center. So you want to try and get your best honey frames here. You put your brood down here. Of course, eventually this brood will kind of go away, but in the wintertime, your bees are going to move up because heat rises. So you want them to be able to move up and cluster on the honey. Ventilation, consuming honey and creates some heat and water vapor. So you need some ventilation, or you'll build up with a lot of humidity and it'll literally rain in your hive. So one of the ways that I help deal with this is I have a notch in my inner cover right here at the top on the front, about an inch or so wide, and that little bit of ventilation there will stop condensation. I like to put a cover, or close up my bottom board, and I'll put in an entrance reducer and leave a vent there. But you can, a lot of people leave the bottom screens open all winter, or you can put your screen in, or put your insert in and leave a little gap if you are seeing condensation build up. The other thing you can do is use a popsicle stick or prop the top cover up just a little bit, just to give them a little bit of ventilation at the top. So be glad you live in Texas, so we don't have to do this. We don't have to put insulated tops on. We don't have to wrap them. We don't have to do that because our winters are not that bad. So, but you do need to do a little bit of preparation. Why? They keep warm in clusters. So a bee's body temperature, it's 45 degrees, you've got frozen bees. At 50 degrees, they'll start having their muscles paralyzed. At 57 degrees, they start clustering. Outside, it's kind of strange because they are cold-blooded insects. A lot of times you will see bees still flying when it's 50 degrees outside. So they'll be out flying anywhere from 50 to 110 out. But if it's lower than 48 degrees, they are definitely clustered. If it's below 45 degrees, they don't do any cleansing flights. Bees are kind of unique in the way they're built. They can hold it forever if they really need to. You know, when they fill up their honey stomach, it'll take up most of their abdomen. Well, they can do the same thing in reverse and hold their bowels, you know, until they basically fill up. Stomach would fill up. It's not really good for them to do that, and a lot of times they'll end up getting dysentery, and then you'll have brown streaks and stuff in your hive. We'll talk about that a little bit more. So the cluster, when they cluster together, usually what happens is some of the worker bees will crawl down into empty cells, and then other bees will get on top and they detach their wings and shiver to generate heat. And normally your queen, she's going to be basically in the center of that cluster somewhere, because if she gets too cold, it can disturb Macathia, and then she will not be able to lay in the spring. And of course, brood requires temperature of about 91 to 93. So here in Texas, usually they're clustering at night, and then during the day, most of the time they're active, and they'll be doing some cleansing flights and moving around in the hive. But, you know, keep this information in mind. So, winter bees. This is kind of a drawing of what happens with the brood population. You usually have a big buildup. They'll start in February, and the queen will start laying. But at that period of time, there isn't too many flowers out there, so they're kind of set on using the whatever stores they have left. So when the queen starts laying here, there's not a whole lot of nectar and pollen coming in, and so they're using up what they've got stored. Of course, then it builds up, and usually, you know, after, you know, in May, you know, your nectar flow kind of slows down, so it'll kind of take a dip. Sometimes we have some blooms in June, but a lot of times it kind of more comes down like this. So your adult population is dropping in the spring, but your brood population is going to start coming up. And then we're in this area here right now. That's when we need to prepare for our winter bees being raised. The vitellogenin, that's where we're talking about fat bees. This is the fat bodies here of a forager bee on the left. So there's not a whole lot there. And a nurse or winter bee is going to look like this. A lot of fat bodies that they need in order to survive longer through the winter. So this is from Scientific Beekeeping. So, you know, in a normal pattern, you've got your brood, and then your nurse bees, they're consuming pollen. Their vitellogenin or VG is high, and it's converted into royal jelly and worker jelly. Those glands are active for about 10 to 14 days. Okay, then it becomes a middle-aged bee, and It's kind of in the labor pool. It's weaned from the pollen. So the VG is still pretty high. But then when it becomes a forager bee, then that VG is low and it's short-lived. You only get about 2 to 3 weeks. And they'll beg for jelly. Now the winter bees, they're like nurse bees. So they've got high VG. It's stored and they live quite a while. So that means that in the early spring, they can come back in here and operate as a nurse bee to take care of those newly laid eggs and larvae. So they can come right back in here. But if they aren't very healthy, they end up being here, and then they really can't help with that new larva. Why strive for healthy bees? Bees damaged by varroa, the viruses, nosema, or malnutrition at any stage of their development are compromised. Compromised bees cannot forage, clean, feed, or care for the queen as they should. Compromised bees only live about 50 to 70% as long as they should. So they die young. So if you go into winter with compromised bees, they might be dying off in December and there won't be anything left to raise, the young bees in the spring. So when they're compromised, the hurt continues with each generation becoming worse and worse. Compromised nurse bees negatively impacts future queen rearing capability. So if the nurse bees are compromised, they can't even replace a failing queen with another good viable queen. That's why a lot of times if you have a failing queen and a weak hive, you're better off getting a brand new queen than letting them raise their own. Bees in a cluster continue to consume pollen. So they still will consume pollen in the wintertime because they need that protein to keep up their fat bodies. Bees collect approximately 100 pounds of pollen per year per hive. 100 pounds of pollen will make about 350,000 bees. Of course, those bees are also continually being replaced. So you can go through that many bees in 1 year with a good strong hive. Brood production begins before significant pollen is available in the environment. About the first thing that's available as far as pollen in our area is usually the elm pollen. So that's and that'll be usually in February timeframe. That'll be about the first time there's any pollen available. And then after that, it kind of depends on the rains. So it's usually a good idea to feed pollen in the early spring or the winter time to increase brood production. Honeybees require 10 amino acids. So they have to have all these different amino acids. Now, the crude protein requirement of pollen is about 20%. So bees must forage different pollen sources for the 10 amino acids they require to make proteins. They require the diversity in their pollen diet to gain all the micronutrients they need. That's why you don't want to put pollen collectors on your hives and take out any pollen that they're bringing in, because you'll make the hive weak. If you put on pollen collectors, you need to just do it for very short periods of time. The pollen must be broken down by enzymes that the bees add to the pollen when they push it into the cells, and the microbial activity in their component breaks them into their component amino acids and micronutrients. This process takes about 5 days to make bee bread. So it takes about 5 days to go from being raw pollen to being the bee bread that they can actually consume. Single crop pollen is hard on bees. Like eating only almond pollen while high in crude protein is like just eating steak at every meal for months. You know, it doesn't give you all the nutrients you need. It doesn't give them all the nutrients they need. That's why monocultures do not work well for the bees. A lot of the almond growers now are planting other flowers along the edges of the almond groves in order to provide bees with a more diverse diet. It helps keep them stronger. How do you do it? Well, enduring the summer dearths, so preparing for fall in July and August, you need to, take care of your varroa. Make sure that they've got, 6 to 8 frames of honey or nectar and 1 to 2 frames of pollen. Combine your weak hives with strong ones. Test for varroa mites and treat. Here's kind of a chart of some of the different options. A lot of people use the ApiGuard or this one, which is temperature sensitive. Personally, I use oxalic acid dribble, but some people say this isn't good enough. You have more losses, but I see a lot of this, whether or not this works well, is based on timing. But pick a method and use it. But if you are using these chemical treatments, do not use the same chemical treatment year after year. You might use ApiGuard 1 year and then switch to HopGuard or Amitraz. Rotate, because the mites will become used to one treatment. Okay, going into winter. Final varroa measurement, remove varroa treatments, make sure they've got resources of 10 frames of honey and nectar, last opportunities in October, November, get them fed up, have them have the resources that they need available. You should strive to have like 16 frames of winter bees. That's between 10 to 20,000 bees. The more bees you have in the hive, the less resources it takes for them to generate the heat to stay alive. A smaller, weaker hive needs more resources to stay warm. They have to, because they're burning through more resources. Reduce your hive to 2 boxes. Do not leave a bunch of empty supers on there. The bees move up in the wintertime, so reduce it down to your 2 brood boxes. And if they don't have enough bees to take care of that, you may need to reduce it down to 1 box. But you'll have a harder time getting 1 box usually through the winter than you will if you have a stronger hive. Of course, he recommends you open up the bottom screens. I don't do that. I close them, but that's a personal choice. But I do end up, using a upper entrance, which provides a little bit of ventilation at the top. Install your entrance reducers so that you have a big wind coming right in the front door. You can identify your best queen and plan to use her as a breeder queen in the spring to create nukes. Make sure her hive has more than adequate resources, because you want her to be really, really strong. So that queen that produced a lot of honey and kept strong all summer, that's the one that you want to use as your breeder queen, if you're going to create queens and nukes. Midwinter, you want about 6 to 8 frames. If you do not have that much, you can feed, you can feed solid frame, candy boards and stuff, but we have enough warm days that if you do like frame feeders or top feeders, you can get by with feeding them syrup. So you want to make sure they have pollen. I put dry pollen feeders out in the wintertime, and any day that it's nice, the bees are hitting those dry pollen feeders. But you want to strive to have about 12 to 16 frames of winter bees. Prepare pollen feeders, buy pollen substitute, prepare your sugar water feeders for the winter. If you use feeding stimulants, you want to get that. Next month we'll be talking about some of the essential oils that are feeding stimulants. Prepare your comb supers to get ready for the spring. Pests. All right, so in exiting winter, so in January, February, March, you can go back and check your varroa levels. One of the things with me using oxalic acid dribble is I treat in the winter when they're broodless with the oxalic acid, and that knocks out the varroa mites because it gets, there's no capped cells for them to hide in. And that usually does really, really well, and I don't have to worry about the varroa mites in the spring. But if you're using chemical treatments, you may need to go ahead and do some tests and check and see what your varroa mite levels are. There's a lot of different ways to deal with varroa mites, and pick what works the best for you. If you have in the spring, you're more likely to have problems with nosema or chalk brood. I haven't heard of any outbreaks in our area of European foul brood for a long time. But if you do suspect that you have it, you can have the Texas Apiary Inspection Service check for that. If you have them come out to do an inspection, they do charge for that. But if you look at your bees and they're doing well, that's not required. Chalk brood, a lot of times that's caused by having too much humidity in the hive. You can't really treat for it, but you may need to have a little bit more ventilation if you start seeing, little chalk brood mummies. One of the things you don't want to see is this over here. This is a sign that your bees have starved to death, because those bees that crawled down in the cells, they didn't have anything to eat, and they just died. So you don't want to see that sight. So exiting in the early spring, you want to have 4 to 6 frames of honey, nectar, and feed if necessary. You still want to have about 2 frames of pollen. Feed either dry pollen patties or, pollen patties or dry pollen substitute. to make sure that they have enough pollen. So you should start to be seeing in about February, could be early March, it depends on the weather. You want to start seeing some winter bees with the brood being laid, so those winter bees will be taking care of your new spring bees. Reverse boxes if necessary. A lot of times in the spring, your queen will start laying in the top box, and you need to move her back down into the bottom box so that the honey will be on the top. You can remove ventilation props and entrance reducers in the early spring, and add supers as the brood increases. Prepare to raise queens from your identified breeder and identify potential cell builder hives with an excess of nurse bees. Colony population follows pollen availability. So when pollen is available, the population will grow. So pollen substitutes, of course, we're going to be selling pollen feeders that they look a little like this. Ours are a little bit different. They have a screen in here and a cap on the back. But we will be selling pollen feeders as a fundraiser. But on the pollen feeders, I usually put about a cup of pollen in there at the time, because if you have high humidity or rain, it will either make the pollen mold or make it stick together and the bees can't utilize it. So I just put in small amounts at a time that they can use up pretty quickly. So for a review, take care of your pest and disease by controlling your varroa. Monitoring is the only way you know for sure what your varroa load is. Make sure you have enough fat bees to produce adequate winter bees. Enough stored honey and nectar to last the winter, pollen to last the winter, and available in early spring. Right size the hives. You know, don't leave a lot of empty boxes on there. Store your comb properly. Provide ventilation, reduce the entrance. Make preparations to feed. Check your bees in the wintertime at least once a month to make sure that they have enough resources. So successfully rearing queens in the spring starts with healthy overwintered queens. The sooner you have abundant nurse bees, the sooner you can begin queen rearing. So your goal is to have 0% winter losses. You want to have 100% of your bees survive the winter, basically. So you can do this. So you can create some splits and some nukes as replacement queens, or sell them, or expand your apiary. Okay. So do I have any questions? Oh. Looks like everybody's muted.
No questions for me.
Hi, this is Tim McGee. I do have one quick question. I see that, and I might have missed it from the beginning. Byron's recording the session. I'm just wondering, will this Zoom session be posted on the website to where we can get back to it? Because personally, there was a lot of notes that I missed during the presentation. There was a lot of really great information that I liked today. So I just wanted to see how I could get a copy of the recording or be able to review it.
Yeah, Byron, you were recording this, right? You're muted.
That's correct.
Right, Byron?
Yes, I'm off mute. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, yes.
Are you recording this?
Yes.
So you're going to be able to get that to Stacy to get it up on the website?
post it up to the Google Drive and she can pull it down and post it there.
So give it a few days and it should be up on the website.
Thank you very much.
No
Thank you very much.
problem. Light, I can see. Okay. Anybody else have any questions? Well, if we don't have any questions, then we can go ahead and close this meeting. Oh, somebody had a chat up here. Oh, okay. So Jay, Dana Moss, and Will Ayers are willing to serve on the nomination committee. So